I'm delighted to be able to be joined on the stage here today by Carl Paulson, who's the former Chief Procurement Officer at LV, Kieran Thompson, who's a category buyer at NFU Mutual, and Colin Downey, who's the Sales and Partnership Director of Wild Hearts Group, who are actually a supplier to both of these businesses and also to some of our other customers as well. We're going to run through a number of questions and answers that will hopefully give a real insight into what I think is a really interesting and rewarding area of procurement practice. So, Colin, could I ask you to start by setting the context here? Tell us a bit about Wild Hearts, tell us what your core business is and what it is that makes you perhaps a little different from most suppliers in your sector.
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you very much for being able to be involved in your conference today. I really appreciate the opportunity to give you a bit of insight into us and our customer base. Broadly speaking, Wild Hearts has become the largest social enterprise, business-to-business social enterprise in the UK. 100% of the profit from the goods and the services that we sell go directly to the Wild Hearts Foundation. So we operate directly in indirect procurement. There is a specific reason for that. So generally speaking, the categories are low risk and they are relatively unemotional when it comes to switching suppliers. So the idea is ultimately if you're buying from Wild Hearts, our customers are creating contributions to the Wild Hearts Foundation. We're not interested in your CSR budget, we're not interested in soliciting donations, we're interested in market opportunities and becoming an effective supplier. I appreciate that a lot of the commodities that we work in, we must compete well on price, our services, and product quality and delivery. But if we get those things correct, we ultimately like to ask our customers, why would you not buy from us because of what we can do together using your procurement spend. So we're different because of what we do with the profit, but broadly speaking, the day-to-day is very similar. It's procurement, it's selling services, it's getting businesses to buy from us and convincing our customer base that we are the right choice for them. I'm delighted to say we've got lots of recognisable brands, LV, NFU Mutual. Warburton's are here, one of our big customers. Bailey Gifford I saw on the list as well, have been a customer back in Scotland of ours for years. So that's broadly what we do. In a quick snapshot from a social perspective, we've got microfinance investments globally, we've got microfinance investments in 40 countries. We've also got an enterprise education programme that is free for school kids in the UK, and to date 40,000 young kids have been through that programme because of our customers purchasing really mundane products and services from us.
Brilliant, thank you. Got rid of that noise as well. Okay, and beyond Wild Hearts, can you give us a bit of a wider view as to social enterprise mission and kind of how it plays a part in today's business world?
Yeah, I think I've seen, since we started Wild Hearts, I was aware that CSR was very much at the forefront of a lot of procurement conversations when you discussed the type of business that we were. It took me a little bit of time to appreciate that CSR wasn't connected to mainstream ideals with inside a business. They weren't, generally speaking, part of the leadership team. I thought I'd show you this slide just to give you an insight into the growth of the social enterprise sector, how it works, and ultimately why, in my opinion and many social enterprise circles' opinion, that a lot of the work, without disrespect to CSR, but it is changing considerably, and it's not the future of social business. Very quickly, to put this into perspective, over there on the right-hand side, if you can see $15 billion US, that's the total amount of money that is spent between FTSE 350 businesses and the Fortune 500 companies. And these are to scale, these planets are to scale, so think of it like a solar system. This big one here is the total spend in global trades in goods and services. CSR, between the world's, arguably the world's biggest 850 companies, is that tiny dot way over there. And the trade in goods and services is here. So the future of my business and all the other social entrepreneurs is on this planet here. The power that you have as procurement people to make the CSR planet bigger is over here. So in terms of the relative scale, with respect to all the great stuff that goes on in CSR, CSR is not going to change the world. And with lots of difficult challenges in procurement and strategy, I think that's one of the biggest drivers of why social enterprise has become a mainstream part of procurement. Procurement professional strategic thinking about why you onboard social enterprises, so you can drive CSR outcomes using the money that you're spending anyway. I wanted to touch on the next slide as well, just to give you an idea, and Carl and and Kieran and lots of our customers are quite aware of the impacts that can be driven. But broadly speaking, over the years, you've probably got a diversity strategy, you've got a BLME strategy, you've probably got a small and medium-sized enterprise strategy, and your CSR stuff is ignited in that. One of the interesting things about social enterprises in a sort of default position, whether you're Wild Hearts or you're from Babies We Love or Change Please Coffee, etc., you will be working in areas and trying to help certain areas that make headlines in mainstream space. So FTSE 100 businesses have a terrible sort of gap between the richest in their business and what they pay the lowest paid workers. Interestingly, in social enterprise circles, 78% of ratified social enterprises, of which there are 104,000 in the UK, by the way, employing over 2 million people and contributing £60 billion to the UK economy. It's not, it is a very mainstream sector. 78% of social enterprises pay the living wage. The ratio for pay is 2.7 to 1. It's really close. The majority of social enterprises are actually led by a female CEO, or they have a very diverse board. One of the crucial statistics here is 28% of social enterprises are based in the most deprived areas of the UK. So by default, if you're onboarding and seeking out social enterprises in your supply chain, you are starting to hit these metrics from nothing to do with CSR and nothing to do with volunteer, days off, or any other metric you want to score it on. You just do it through supply chains. Now, I'm not naive enough to appreciate that, as a procurement professional, you are reliant on having really good suppliers, and you must make sure that social enterprises suppliers are as good as the rest of your supply-based opportunities. But I think the social enterprise sector is well aware of that these days. Wasn't as aware of it maybe 10 years ago, but no social enterprise will fight for procurement business in mainstream large-scale corporates unless they're capable. I think they've got a lot better. Generally speaking, social enterprises are as competitive, if not cheaper, than your current supply base. And I can prove that. I don't have enough fingers and toes to prove that from our perspective, but I have seen it gather momentum. Actually, the competitiveness argument is pretty old hat, actually. And I think there's lots of mutual benefits by working with businesses that are driven to drive sort of social impact outputs.
Right, thank you. Okay, Kieran, from a buyer's perspective, I guess, could you introduce NFU and give us a little bit of insight into the culture of the organisation?
Yeah, sure. So NFU Mutual, we are a top 10 UK insurer. We were set up in 1910 by 7 farmers to solve a social and environmental issue, much like a social enterprise is set up. And there was an issue where steam trains were going through farmers' lands, and the sparks were flying off the trains and setting fire to their crops. So the business was set up to insure against those types of risks. In terms of our culture, we're a mutual, so we don't have any shareholders. So we operate solely for our members and do kind of what's right for them, and they're at the forefront of our kind of decision making. Secondly, we are a very people-focused business, and we have very high employment engagement scores. Thirdly, responsible business, or CSR, has become more prominent in our company, and it's even featuring on our strategic wheel that's communicated internally. And the great thing about working with social enterprises is they can help enhance and complement all those elements of our culture.
Thanks, okay. So obviously Wild Hearts is a supplier to NFU. How did that actually come about? Were you looking specifically for a social enterprise supplier, or was that just as a bonus that came in as a more general sort of sourcing exercise that you were undertaking?
To be honest, we kind of fell into it. So I had a chance call with our facilities management provider to see if they had any ideas about stationery companies, office supply companies. We were doing a fairly run-of-the-mill stationery tender, and they just happened to mention that they were looking at Wild Hearts. So I've never heard of them. Had a quick look on their website, saw some happy images and references to sustainability. Thought that looks interesting, so we got them in. Found out they function in the same way as any other stationery provider. But once we saw the videos of the great impact that they have on young people in the UK and female entrepreneurs in the developing world, we knew that this was kind of something special that no one else in the market could offer. But also they were in the tender process, so they didn't have to compete against some big stationery providers. And we're kind of delighted that they came out well on cost, performance, customer references as well.
Okay, thanks. So do you think then, as buying organisations, that you have a responsibility to consider the social impact of your operations and the way in which you buy, and I guess who you buy from? Do you think that forms part of the equation?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's important to point out, as Colin alluded to, is this, it's not just pure altruism. You're not just doing these companies a favour. You're getting innovative products. Often they can compete on price. They're often they're more flexible and nimble, and can help you out when needed. So you're getting better products, better services as well. And secondly, as Colin mentioned, and we were talking about this in our Responsible Business Committee the other day, we have a kind of a finite budget for charitable donations, which can only go so far, but we spend 500 million on our supply chain. If we can convert some of that large supply chain spend into good causes, then there's a very powerful and great potential for that. But we just thought we'd show you some example social enterprises, and this is really the fun bit where you get to find out what they offer and how they're different. There's the soap company. They're a soap manufacturer, and they employ people who are blind or disabled. And a lot of big companies have got the soap and hand soap in their buildings. I know PwC, Johnson & Johnson have them. I think LV as well have them in their buildings. It's a fantastic soap, but in their factory I've heard when you walk in there, there's kennels for the guide dogs, which is a really emotional kind of thing to see, and it just shows what a great cause they are. There's Graduate Planets. They're a recruitment company who work in the same way as any other recruitment agency, but they invest their profits for every placement you make with them. That goes into educational sessions for school children about the environment, or it can help fund tree planting sessions for corporates. Really good one is Auticon. They provide IT and data consultants, but from people who are on the autism spectrum, and where generally there's a 16% employment rate of people who have autism who want to work, which is just a terrible figure. But these guys that come in, and their performance way exceeds, the Siemens have said it way exceeds the performance they get from regular resources that they employ. So that's really good. There's Recycling Lives just up the road in Preston. They're a recycling and waste management company. They're award-winning. They employ ex-offenders on programmes, and also they have a residential facility for the homeless. Of their ex-offenders that they're employed, there's a 5% rehabilitation, 5% reoffending rate, which is just fantastic. There's Trojan Mailings, who are a digital, who are a mailing company, can do kind of mail outs and letterheads and so on. They employ people who've got learning disabilities and help them get into the job market. I think probably a lot of people's favourites is From Babies with Love. So for corporates, they offer a parental leave gift service. So if somebody goes off on maternity leave, these guys will send a fantastic pack of baby grows, hats, and what have you to the employee, with a handwritten card, obviously from our company, to say that we're thinking of you in this special time. Much more meaningful than kind of a bunch of flowers. Deloitte have said it's the most engaging thing they've done for their employees. It's just truly a great idea. And then there's kind of Harry Specter's. They employ young people who've got autism to make these fantastic chocolates that can be used at corporate events or send out to customers.
Brilliant, thanks Kieran. So Carl, if I can bring you in at this point, I guess social responsibility and awareness of principles that are deeply embedded in LV's corporate thinking. Can you tell us a bit about the business and sort of how those principles manifest themselves in the business at large, I guess, and then the procurement?
Yeah, sure. I mean, similar to Kieran in many ways, we too are a mutual, a little bit longer established, 176 years ago, but in many ways one of the original social enterprises as well. We were founded out of the appalling squalor of Victorian Liverpool as one of the very first friendly societies, so that the ordinary working folk of Liverpool could afford to bury their loved ones with dignity. Kind of forward 160 years or so, and we invested in establishing a general insurance business, which we're probably better known for now with a lot of our TV advertising particularly, but have remained true to those mutual roots of trying to do the right thing. You see the green heart at the centre of what we are trying to do. We want to be at the centre of the heart of the communities which we operate in, and social enterprise is just a really, really good way of doing that for all of the reasons that my colleagues here on the stage have said. Our supply chain spend, best part of £1 billion when you factor everything in, completely dwarfs our CSR, and it was a complete no-brainer for me to start suggesting to Exco and the board that we looked at expanding into the realms of social enterprise to really improve the level of good that LV could deliver overall to the community.
Okay, so corporate responsibility and community, pretty central principles at LV then. How did you go about turning procurement, I suppose, from an essentially savings, cost-focused kind of organisational function to adopting that broader remit and incorporating social enterprise into that?
I have to say that's been, for me, the most pleasing thing of what I've done over the last year or so, embarked on this particular journey. Let's face it, as procurement and finance professionals, I would hardly say that any of us are really well received in our business. When we go talking to stakeholders, we're kind of tolerated at best or welcomed when we've done something really, really well. There's a bit of suspicion around the place. The really good thing is that by embarking on a social enterprise program, which we've christened Green Heart Procurement within our business for obvious reasons to do with our logo, that's completely revolutionised the scale of conversations that we have with people. Effectively, I found a way of people feeling good about working with procurement, whereas in the past, they haven't really felt quite so good. And the reason behind that is very simple. Through a lot of the work we've done with our social enterprises and in the teams, we've taken this down to an individual level. So every social enterprise has a case study that we can work with. In Wild Heart's case, it's Betty. Betty borrowed the equivalent of £40 in Kampala, Uganda, from one of the microloans that the foundation support. She was able to use that money to establish a fruit and veg stall, and as a result of the profits that makes, she's able to educate her children for the first time. So we constantly drip feed stories like that out into the wider business, so it doesn't become a conversation about a ream of paper. It becomes a conversation about helping somebody to educate their kids, and what's not to like about that.
Fantastic, thank you. Colin, again from the supplier's side, I'd be interested actually taking that point forward just to understand a bit more about how big an impact can be made here actually. Have you got any specifics that you can share with us about how buying for good really can make a difference?
Yeah, there's two sides to it. The foundation, because we are externally audited, we have to relate every bit of profit that goes into the foundation directly back to the business. We've got to be able to stand by the figures that have been externally audited. That's one of the good things about social enterprises. I think they're very transparent. They tend not to have abbreviated accounts. You tend to be able to see exactly what is being drawn down into the business, and you must certainly be able to see all of the net profit being moved to the foundation. I've been involved with Wild Hearts since day one. It wasn't my original idea, but I was the first employee, and if I'd said to you just sort of over a decade later that between our work and our team's work we would have been able to invest £20 million and help over 1 million people, that figure's just been released actually from our just audited accounts last month. I just wouldn't have believed you. I have had the privilege of meeting Betty, of meeting many people in our microfinance programs. Our Microtyco enterprise education program is deliberately targeting kids from low-income communities in the UK, seeing the difference that makes to those kids ultimately from really mundane products. I didn't go to school or university and sometimes joke about it, sort of think I was going to be the stationery and the Tipex guy. But you use these products and services as a vehicle to create impact. But on the other side of the fence, from a business perspective, I know an awful lot of procurement people who've been able to raise their profile significantly within their business by bringing a new strategy into procurement. I know an awful lot of procurement people who've generally gone on a course of onboarding social enterprises and saved money, full stop. So ultimately, that's what their job is, probably been there for. But beyond that impact, this has gone, social enterprise, I think, has gone far beyond feeling good, fuzzy feelings. Ultimately, you don't have to care what we do with the profit. And Deloitte used to say to that to us, which I was quite taken aback at in the old days, because they were like, well, actually, we don't really care. We know you move the profit to the foundation, but they were very blunt about what was in it for them. And I was quite taken aback and said, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, we can use it in our procurement processes. I'm going to touch on this later. The multiple benefits become very strategic quite quickly. You don't have to like what we do. But this next video is very interesting. This young kid, his name's Jamie. He was a school excludee from the age of 11, so he was illiterate. I think I might have shown you this video when we did our tender for NHS Mutual, but this is an example of a young kid really far from the labour market, being groomed for life on benefits, as his social worker sort of described it. And then he took part in microtyco, and he beat the University of his team in Cambuslang, one of the roughest areas of Glasgow, beat the University of Cambridge and the University of Oxford. And what it did, you have to tune your ear in here to a really strong Glasgow accent, but if you listen carefully to what he says, this is what microtyco, how it changes outlook in 4 weeks. Good sound.
Did have, hang on a second.
You said we have to tune in.
Just turned it right down.
I didn't really like school. The only subject I liked was sports coaching. I got suspended twice, and I can't remember why I got suspended. So we had to borrow £1 from microtyco. But when I was thinking about it, the only thing I really do with £1 is I'd buy a scratch-it card or I'd put a football coupon on. Before I started microtyco, I would have never been on time for it. I'd showed up 10-15 minutes late. But when I was doing microtyco, I was there 10 minutes early and ready to work. Never know how to go about setting up a business, like investing money, like keeping half it and investing the other half in something, and then if that doesn't work out for me, like keep using the other half to invest in another thing. Like I know how to go about making money, keeping money, and basically make myself a profit. Back before I started doing microtyco, I didn't think I'd be able to even be able to get near setting up a business. Now I feel as if anybody could really set up a business. I could get a job now. If I went for the interview, I'd feel more confident, and I'd be able to tell the people what I've done, my achievements in that. Now microtyco has changed my whole outlook and my future.
So Jamie couldn't read and write, and he didn't have anything from his school. He didn't have a school life. He had nothing to point to, no CV, no training, no academic or other qualifications, and microtyco allowed him to talk about something, and he went on to get a job in Arnold Clark. They had to teach him to read and write because ultimately he couldn't use the manuals, but they said he was very good with his hands. I'll leave that there, and he passed his interview with flying colours. So it's a great sort of impact story, but all of our impact is driven through procurement. We can't do anything without our customers. So it's a great story for our customers that we mutually developed because of that supply and client relationship.
Okay, and you began to touch on it a bit earlier, but as sort of from a hard business benefit perspective, how would you say that building social enterprise into procurement practice helps the buying organisation, kind of beyond the fuzzy feel-good factor?
Yeah, Deloitte used to talk about it in recruitment. Specifically, it's very difficult for them to differentiate themselves from the other big 8, and they all paid the same, they had the same career benefits, so how could they say they were doing things differently? It can impact your customers, it's an obvious story, but someone like Warburton's, who've got a very established community investment programme, buying from social procurement just gives them more stories. There's a finite budget for CSR stories in people's time, so I often see procurement being a sustainable CSR relationship as opposed to sort of one over the nation. So future talent can be impacted, and you touched on this with your team. I know that Johnson & Johnson used to talk about the only way to be popular in procurement was to buy a dog and take it into work. And their social impact through procurement program changed that. You know, the procurement people were all walking about with stories, and suddenly everybody knew them inside of Johnson & Johnson. They had names to talk about, the stories to tell at the canteen, and they'd never have had that exposure. But these statistics come directly from Social Enterprise UK, from all of the businesses who've signed up to the Buy Social Corporate Challenge, including LV and others who've been researched. And I think the 57% one's really interesting, that they think the program is driving different relationships with strategic suppliers. We sell much more than stationery now. We do printing, we do off-site storage, we do shredding, we do merchandise, we do corporate gifts. We are now a strategic supplier to J&J, where they're looking to work with us. Every strategic supplier relationship means that I can report to the trustees about a long-term funding to the foundation from my perspective, but equally allows us to diversify and sell more products to our procurement people who are wedded to driving impact. So there's lots of external recognition, lots of awards that can be won by having procurement strategies, but the most important one on that slide is 86% at the bottom right-hand corner. 86% of businesses who are buying with social enterprise in the supply chains use it to help them win business. And there isn't a tier 1 government supplier that I know that doesn't use their association with us in their tenders. And they use it all day long, and they should. They bring us into tenders to help them win business. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It should be a mutually beneficial relationship. It shouldn't just be about savings. And you can forget all the impact stuff that does make us feel great, because that's why we get out of bed in the morning. But it's really these stats that, well, why would you not buy from social enterprises? You find me a CEO that would look at those stats and not listen to you as procurement professionals.
Brilliant, thank you. So going back to NFU and LV, how do you feel that, also, how do you feed that message across the rest of the business? How do you get the rest of the business to listen to that at an operational level and at a board level? Is it heard? Is it supported?
Yeah, so I would say absolutely 100%. And at a board level, then when I go and talk about savings, risk, and all the rest of the things we're paid to do, fantastic, lots of levels of engagement. When I talk about what we're doing with social enterprises, the new social enterprises we're taking on board, or the collateral we've created, the fact that in our first year with Wild Hearts we were able to fund the best part of 1,000 microloans, that's 1,000 Bettys, that's when people's faces really come alive. So it's that level of real deep engagement, and people see procurement as doing something different, and I think that is, as a professional, that's been my biggest learning from it. It's completely out of the box.
Kieran, same for you?
Yes, similarly, it's a really nice message to get across. I mean, as a procurement professional myself, we're always trying to build relationships and a network within our business, but this is presenting them with social enterprises. You're putting something really positive into their area, and I've kind of met more senior managers via social enterprise work than I would have done previously. We're also, same as Carl, my manager Gareth, he has to present his annual board report. Talks about supplier risk, numbers, savings, but obviously the icing on the cake is talking about this social enterprises, and again, yeah, people around the table come alive when that gets mentioned.
And does it help in other areas? I mean, one of the things that's often cited is recruitment, for example, and being able to use this as a millennial attraction, if you like, almost, in terms of credentials to the recruitment market.
Yeah, well, I would say that is obvious, and that's what young people are looking out for these days. But recently, we have had customers come to us and say the reason we went with you, corporate customers, is for the work, your responsible business work, and the stuff you're doing in the supply chain with social enterprises. So it's definitely having a positive impact.
Completely agree.
Okay, and in terms of the next few years, how do you see things evolving, I suppose, within the business? Are you setting specific objectives and targets within your organisations around social enterprise, or is it kind of a more organic process?
So we are completely, one of the things which is really still relatively new, about 18 months into this, we concentrated on a lot of shovel-ready things, which were ready to go. The harder things, which are broadly stuff which is going to be consumed directly by our customers, we've just started with Recycling Live, so there'll be direct waste and recycling services in the home claims environment. So at a time when customers are already pretty shaken because they're having to make a major claim on their household policy. So when we get that sort of thing right, then I'm confident that as our customers start to live and breathe this as well, then we'll get a really virtuous circle going.
And yeah, we've got a simple target this year of trying to work with 5 social enterprises, which should be doable. From that, we're hoping that kind of gets it into the public domain within our company, and then maybe we could look to step into the social corporate challenge.
Okay, thank you. And I guess finally, sort of any advice that you give people in the audience that are considering starting out on this road? Just before I ask that, actually, how many organisations in the room do have a social enterprise strategy as part of their procurement at the minute? Starting to. Okay, so actually tells a story, I think, in terms of where we're at with this process.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I could say one thing: don't wait. It's absolutely A, relatively easy-ish to do, but B, completely fulfilling. So please look at it.
Yeah. There's also the Social Enterprise UK. They're the membership body in the UK for social enterprise. They can help you. What they've done for us is do a small diagnostics of our supply chain spend for a small outlay to help identify a list of social enterprises that we can work with. So that was a really good place for us to start with. And like Carl says, there's some really quick, easy wins that you can get done, tomorrow, get ordered tomorrow. And yeah, just as a procurement professional, once you get one on board, it's such a great feeling to know that just by doing your job, which is otherwise a fairly ordinary kind of practice, it's just a great feeling once you've got one on board.
And just signpost colleagues' use of it as well. So we've got relatively decently sized stickers next to the soap in our washrooms, which is from Soap Co as well. So people are aware that it comes from a social enterprise source. They're aware that procurement have done it. So you get that virtuous circle doing. Try not to be horrified when you discover how little soap you do use in your bathrooms. I was reasonably horrified and stopped shaking hands for a couple of weeks after that. But it's a really easy one.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, of course.
I would just echo what Carl was saying. I wouldn't wait. The government is moving towards enforcing weighted programs for Tier 1 suppliers. So if any of you are a Tier 1 supplier and you're not buying socially, you'll be enforced to do so soon. So it'd be helpful to get ahead of the curve on that, I would argue. If you're working in sort of private procurement capacity, I'd argue that if you're not ultimately looking for a social enterprise strategy or onboarding social enterprises right now, your competitors most certainly are. So I wouldn't wait that long because it is really growing fast, the outputs of social impact. I sit on the board of Social Enterprise UK as a non-executive director, so I know a lot of social enterprises. If you want some signposting without going to Social Enterprise UK, I'm more than happy to help. I'm sure Kieran and Carl will do exactly the same. I think I signposted a lot of those suppliers to you guys originally. It's great to see those relationships blossoming. So I'm here for the rest of the day as well. So is my colleague Lisa up at the back. She's waving there enforceably. We'd love to be invited in and have discussions to see if there are products and services that we can sell to you. And we just need access to markets. That's the thing. CSR is not what social enterprise is looking for. They're looking for access to opportunities. It's up to us to win them, and we'll try and win them, to the best of our ability. But if you give us the opportunity, we'll work hard to win them, and that's all. That would be my biggest ask.
Brilliant. Thank you.